The Galactic Military Academy's lecture, Hall 7, fell into absolute silence. 30 cadets from 17 different species sat rigid in their seats, barely breathing. At the front of the room, Professor Thane's 4 eyes had gone wide with instinctive terror. 3 Krell cubs had wandered into the lecture hall. Krell were apex predators from a death world that made Earth look like a garden paradise. Adult Krell stood 3 meters tall with retractable claws that could slice through battle armor. Their cubs, while smaller, were still the size of adult humans and just as dangerous. More dangerous, actually, because they had not yet learned to control their hunting instincts. The 3 cubs prowled down the center aisle, their metallic scales catching the lights. The lead cub, Vash, paused to sniff the air. His lips pulled back, revealing rows of crystalline teeth. A low rumble emerged from his chest, sending every cadet's survival instincts into overdrive. In the third row, Cadet Kaylin watched the cubs carefully. She was human, one of only 5 in her class. She had spent her childhood on Earth's African continent, in regions where large predators still roamed. She had learned to read animal body language before she could read written words. What she saw in these Krell cubs was not hunting behavior. They were scared. Vash roared again, louder this time. The sound was meant to be intimidating, but Kaylin heard the uncertainty beneath it. The cub's scales were slightly raised, a sign of stress. His companions huddled close to him, looking to him for guidance. They were lost, far from wherever they were supposed to be, surrounded by strange creatures in an unfamiliar place. They were doing what any frightened child would do. They were trying to make themselves seem dangerous so nothing would hurt them. Professor Thane had slowly reached for the emergency alert button on his podium. If he pressed it, security would flood the room with tranquilizer gas. It was standard protocol for dangerous animal incursions. The gas would knock out the cubs, but it might also trigger their attack reflexes first. Someone would likely die before the gas took effect. Kaylin stood up. Every eye in the room turned to stare at her. Professor Thane made a small gesture, urging her to sit back down. She ignored him. Moving slowly and deliberately, she stepped into the aisle. Vash's 6 eyes locked onto her immediately. His rumbling intensified. Kaylin did not freeze. She did not run. She simply stood there, relaxed, and made eye contact with him. Then she did something that made every other cadet think she had lost her mind. She sat down on the floor. She crossed her legs and made herself smaller, removing the threat from her posture. In the language of predators across 1,000 worlds, she had just said she was not a challenge. She was not prey running away. She was not a threat standing tall. She was just there, calm and unthreatening. Vash stopped rumbling. His head tilted to one side in confusion. Kaylin reached slowly into her bag. Several cadets gasped, certain she was reaching for a weapon. Instead, she pulled out a small container. It was her lunch, packed that morning. Inside were protein bars, dried fruit, and some jerky made from synthesized meat. She broke off a piece of jerky and held it out on her flat palm. She did not extend her arm toward Vash. She simply held it out to the side, an offering with no pressure. Vash stared at her. His nostrils flared, analyzing the scent. Behind him, his 2 companions chirped softly, a sound young Krell made when confused or uncertain. The lead cub took one cautious step forward, then another. His scales began to lower, returning to their normal position. He approached Kaylin slowly, ready to bolt at any sign of danger. When he got close enough, he stretched his neck out and sniffed the jerky. His crystalline teeth were centimeters from her fingers. One wrong move, one moment of fear, and he could bite her hand off. Kaylin remained perfectly still, her breathing steady and calm. She had hand-fed lions in wildlife sanctuaries, offered treats to rescued wolves, and once spent an afternoon gaining the trust of an injured leopard. This was different, but the principles were the same. Patience, calmness, respect. Vash's tongue flicked out and took the jerky from her palm. He chewed carefully, his eyes never leaving hers. After a moment, his scales smoothed completely flat. The tension left his body. He sat down in front of her. Behind him, his companions made excited chirping sounds and rushed forward. Kaylin broke off more pieces of jerky and dried fruit, distributing them to all 3 cubs. They ate eagerly, their fear forgotten in the simple pleasure of unexpected food. The other cadets watched in stunned silence as the human fed snacks to three of the galaxy's most dangerous predators like they were puppies. Professor Thane stood frozen at his podium, his hand still hovering over the emergency alert point. One of the smaller cubs climbed into Kalen's lap. His weight was substantial, easily 70 kilograms, but she adjusted and kept feeding him small pieces of her lunch. Vash leaned against her shoulder, rumbling again. This time it was not a warning. It was a purr. Kalen smiled and scratched behind his auditory ridge. His purring intensified. "They are just babies," she said softly. "They are scared and lost. They needed someone to help them feel safe." The lecture hall doors burst open. 3 adult Krell stormed in, their eyes wild with panic. They were faculty members from the xenobiology department, searching desperately for the cubs who had escaped from the nursery facility. They stopped when they saw the scene. Their cubs, their precious and dangerous offspring, were cuddled around a human cadet like she was their clutch mother. The human was feeding them and petting them. The cubs were purring. The largest adult, Professor Krenth, approached slowly. She looked at Kalen with an expression the human could not quite read. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "You have done something remarkable, young human." Most species would have panicked. The cubs were defensive and frightened. They might have attacked. She paused, her 6 eyes glistening. "You saw past their teeth and claws. You saw children who needed comfort." Kalen shrugged. "On Earth, we have a saying. All teeth and no bite means someone is trying to seem scary, but is actually harmless." I could see they were more scared than scary. Vash looked up at his mother, then back at Kalen, clearly reluctant to leave. The human gave him one more piece of jerky and a final scratch. "Go on," she said gently. "Your mom was worried about you." The 3 cubs slowly returned to their mother. But Vash paused and looked back at the human one more time. Then he dipped his head in respect. It was something young Krell only did for clutch parents and den leaders. Never for outsiders. Never for prey species. After the Krell family had left, the lecture hall remained silent. Then the cadets began to applaud. It started slow and grew into thunderous appreciation. Kalen returned to her seat as if nothing unusual had happened. Professor Thane cleared his throat. "Well then, that was certainly an unscheduled demonstration of interspecies crisis management. Perhaps Cadet Kalen would like to explain her reasoning to the class." Kalen looked around at her fellow cadets. "It was not very complicated. I just remembered that fear makes everyone dangerous. Even babies. Especially babies. They needed to stop being afraid. So I showed them there was nothing to fear from me." She paused. "On Earth, we learn early that the most dangerous animals are often the most scared. The best way to stay safe is to help them stop being scared. Works with humans too, actually." In the back of the room, a Centauri cadet raised one of her 4 hands. "But Cadet Kalen, were you not afraid? Those are Krell cubs. They could have killed you easily." Kalen considered the question. "I was cautious. But afraid? Not really. I was more worried about them. They were just babies in a strange place. Somebody needed to help them." She smiled. "Besides, I had snacks. Snacks solve a lot of problems." The class laughed, the tension finally breaking. Professor Thane returned to his lecture on tactical planetary assessment. But nobody in that room would forget what they had witnessed. They had seen a human look at apex predators and see children who needed help. They had seen her offer food from her own lunch without hesitation. They had seen her turn a potential tragedy into a moment of connection. Across the galaxy, many species had evolved to survive through strength, speed, or superior technology. Humans had evolved to survive through something different. They had learned to see past teeth and claws, to find common ground with the most unlikely beings, and to offer help even when fear might have been the more rational response. That it was this quality, this strange human ability to care about creatures that might kill them, that would one day make humanity indispensable to the galactic community. For now, in Lecture Hall 7, Cadet Kalen simply opened her notebook and prepared to take notes. Her lunch container was empty, given entirely to 3 scared cubs who had needed a friend. She would need to pack extra snacks tomorrow, just in case.